appeasement, or how to invite the most preventable war in all of human history. Remember, after World War I, practically nobody wanted another war. I mean, there were people who were nationalists who thought that their countries had been ill done by, and there were people who were angry, and there were people who were used to war, and all of that. But in terms of average, everyday people, almost nobody wanted another great war. And this is especially true in those countries that have democratic rule and democratic values. The people in those countries are overwhelmingly pacifistic after World War I. But in one of the typical ironies that exist in human history, the desperate desire to avoid anything like another great war is what brings about another great war, even bigger and worse than the last. Occidentus invertebratus, a West without a backbone, is one of the things that happens as a result of this widespread, deeply profound, overwhelmingly powerful desire to avoid another great war. Britain is fatigued. It has an empire now that's larger than it's ever been. But that great vital spirit that made Englishmen, Scots, Welshmen, Irish, and others go out into the world and explore strange new lands and contact new civilizations and then bring them into the empire and push back the boundaries of the civilized world as Englishmen saw it. That vital spirit is the same sort of spirit that appealed to young men to join the military and fight in the Great War. Most of them are dead. And many of them are long dead before they have an opportunity to have children of their own. The trenches selected out the most aggressive or dedicated or brave or idealistic men in all the countries that fought. Because those men that were self-motivated to fight volunteered not only to join the military, but they volunteered to take missions that maybe they didn't have to take, to lead men into battle or to go into battle under dangerous, less than ideal conditions like everyone else. These men who had made the British Empire, who had the spirit of Kipling and the idealism that said, let us take up this burden of civilization and let us bring it to an ungrateful world filled with people that will hate us for this gift, but who will benefit from the gift that we have to offer. It's those men that made the British Empire, the French Empire, and all the other empires of the late 19th century. It's those kind of men that are going to be needed to maintain the empire, to continue now that vast quantities of land, a quarter of the world's people, a fifth of the world's landmass, or it's a fifth of the world's people and a quarter of the world's landmass. I forget right now. But either way, it's a hell of a large empire that the British have built. And the French have theirs, and others have theirs, the Belgians and the Dutch. The Belgians have the Congo. The Dutch have the East Indies and Asia, among other places. But the British Empire now includes a lot of former German colonies. They have access to all sorts of societies, all around the world because the sun never sets. But they don't have the energy, they don't have the time, they don't have the spirit, they don't have the get up and go because it got up and went and died in World War I, more often than not. So the very type of person, the very type of manly man that Britain needed to consolidate global empire and genuinely introduce the peoples of the empire to an Englishman's notion of civilization, were dead. So Britain is exhausted, and it's all that Britain can do to continue to function as a global class economy and to try their best to maintain peace and order in an empire that's really too big for them to manage after the Great War. The United States, bravely after fighting in World War I, said, "The problems of others are not our concern. We are alone, isolated, protected by two oceans, not one, but two, the Atlantic and the Pacific. We're all protected, and we are the great creditor nation now because most of the world, the civilized world, is in debt to us because of the desperation that their economies faced in World War I. The United States decides that Wilson's ideas were way too idealistic, way too involved, and that when Warren G. Harding was elected in 1921, when he was elected in 1920 and took office in 1921, his slogan was a return to normalcy, whatever the heck that means. Well, most Americans thought that normalcy meant another time like before the war where the United States was not troubled by the affairs of other nations and could simply continue to expand where it wanted to without undue worry about getting dragged into another European or Asiatic conflict. This spirit was one of the reasons why the U.S. Senate, dominated by Republicans, none of whom were invited by Wilson to join him in Paris and at Versailles, why they rejected the Versailles Treaty, because they thought it violated President Washington's famous dictum to avoid foreign entanglements. So the United States, the most powerful economy in the world, the most wealthy country on earth, the United States is now not having anything to do with the League of Nations or collective security. So that leaves Britain and France. Germany's been defeated. Russia's a communist basket case. The others are minor powers. The Japanese are an exception, but they're in the East. They're different. Without the United States, Britain is fatigued. Britain is bad. France is not just fatigued. France is bleeping exhausted. France is also deeply divided. Frenchmen in the interwar period hate other Frenchmen more than they hate the Germans or anyone else outside their society. If you want to understand the terrible result of a people so divided against themselves that they would rather have a foreign overlord than some jerk from the other side, look at France between the wars. It's as bad as Greece was after the Peloponnesian War. I'd rather be ruled by that goat lover from Macedon, Philip, than by those jerks from Thebes. There were French ultramontane who wanted to return to a theocentric Roman Catholic France, like back in the Middle Ages. There were monarchists of various stripes who wanted either Bonaparte's house or Bourbon's house back in power. There were liberty-oriented liberals in the classical sense who wanted an America-style liberal democracy, not as in progressive, but as in liberty-oriented. There were social democrats, hardcore socialists, communists, anarcho-syndicalists, and all sorts of others. And the French society fractured along these political lines so that as time went on, fewer and fewer things unified them. Why was France so bad off? Because the trenches were in France more than they were anywhere else. Yes, there was some Belgian territory around Ypres, but for the most part, it was France. It was French farmland that was ground up by the trenches, that was mined with landmines, that was a death house for generations. French cities were occupied by the Germans or were destroyed in a way that the Germans didn't harm the Belgians, they harmed the French. France lost proportionally more of its people than Britain, by far, more than the United States. French territory was the setting of the war. And after this war, yeah, they got Alsace-Lorraine. But compared to the price that the French nation paid, not worth it. Almost no one looking at the war from Britain or France or the United States could say, yep, it was a tough fight, but it was worth it. No, they didn't think it was worth it. They thought it was futile. And they were going to be darn sure that if another great war came down the pike their way, that they were going to swerve and avoid it at all costs. The West without a backbone. That's part of the setting for appeasement.